Hello and welcome back to Stu Structures. I'm Mark Stewart. We're going to play around with something. I save all of my debris and miscellaneous small cut off parts of wood and everything whenever I do any project. So, I like to use those from time to time, and I have a lot of wood scraps building up from where I cut off windows and tons of things. So I'm going to show you how to take all that scrap debris and make wooden shipping crates. So stay tuned. So welcome back. I do appreciate you coming back and spending this time with me. I do save all my scraps from everything. I mean, they make nice gondola loads or whatever, and I hate throwing away anything that I can use, especially scenery materials. They cost a fortune if you go out there and buy everything. So I save and make from scraps as much as I can make. And every time I make a wooden structure, I'm cutting out wooden square pieces for windows. Or, at the end of all my long wooden dowel pieces and stuff, whenever I get done with sheets, there's always little pieces of sheets left over. And, I have a lot of small square stuff from different stuff. And, I like to make a lot of shipping crates, because in all the freight houses and industries and everything, a lot of things would have been shipped in wooden crates. So, when I get the layout to the point of building my layout, I'm going to need a ton of these in all different sizes. So I'm going to show you how to take a lot of the scrap debris you have hanging around from all your projects and make wooden crates that really don't cost you anything to use for scenery on your model railroad. So let's jump into this. I'm going to experiment with 3 different methods here. I have different size debris and various things to work with. So I go through and sort out the box into the different sizes to start with, so I know what I have to work with. And I have a bunch of these that are real close in size, but these are just different cutouts that I've saved over time from windows and doors in buildings. So, I find 4 that match, or cut some so I have 4 that match, and I start putting boxes together. And I just start out with 2 opposite sides and then come back and glue those together, and then I glue, just odd pieces of small stuff to the ends of them and cut them off flush with the 4 corners that I put together to create a basic box. And this has all sides. Usually there's one side that's not as good as the other, so I'll use that for the bottom side. Now I need to get a bunch of real thin lumber to wrap all these with, and I have this lumber here. So what I'm going to do is just come, and I don't measure anything, I just lay a rule on top of it and start slicing slices off the sides of it. There is a little slight variance in the thickness of these, but I can work it out. That's no big deal. And I just start coming through and dressing all the edges. And I do everything except for the worst side, which is the bottom, and I don't worry about putting this, but I do the ends as well as the tops. And I'm going to finish these in a few different ways. I'm going to put some black wash on a few of these. And it probably would look better if I would have scribed the wood in those. But then I'm going to come back and paint a couple different light colors on some of the others so that there's some variation in the different crates. Now another method I'm going to play with, one of the very first things I ever scratch built in my life was from a piece of old paneling that had stayed out in the rain and separated. And I found a piece of this here on the farm, and you can see it, that once the paneling separates in the rain, it naturally weathers, but there's these real thin layers to work with. So I'm going to create a box out of some of this 3/4 inch styrofoam, and I just come through and cut a bunch of blocks to begin with. I use a knife and just cut strips off of that wood that I had, and make basically boards out of it. Now it doesn't cut easy and nice and not perfect boards the way you would get out of balsa wood or something, so you got to take your time and just play with it, but they're uneven. And I just cut those down to usable size boards, and then I just take Gorilla Glue and just start gluing all those to those styrofoam blocks, and basically that just forms a crate. And I do three sides and the 2 ends, And you know, and this, when I get to this point, all I'm doing is just gluing them on there, letting them run wild, and then I turn them over and come back with a knife and cut them off flush with the other boards, and you know, have a nice even meat around all the sides. And then I start coming back from this with the same boards and just cutting trim to go around the corners and edges like I did the previous boxes that I made. And then once I go ahead and do all the sides, you know, there's a finished product. I need to come back because there's some of the glue that's shiny and put some dull coat on them, but basically that's a nice looking crate. Now the other thing I have is just tons of this miscellaneous bass and balsa wood, little tiny pieces. And you know, I don't like throwing them away, so basically I just come back through the pile and find 4 to 5 of them depending on the sizes, and find duplicates, you know, close to the same sizes. And then I come back and glue all those together in a square and use a knife and trim them. You know, and some of them, the ends trim a little rough, but most of them end up being halfway decent squares. And then that lumber that I had cut the slivers off of to use for trim on those bigger crates, I just cut this in half to make real small trim boards, and then I go ahead and start wrapping the ends. Now some of these I do the long sides, but most of them I just do the 4 sides on the square of the ends of them and leave the middles of them alone. And I just come back and paint them, and you know, I divide these into a couple of different colors. There's one that's a lighter tan and then one that's a slightly darker tan. And you know, it just gives me a bunch of small crates that I can use. Okay, so there you have some quick how-tos on just building some basic wooden crates. The 3 different methods I showed, you know, they're not prime examples of the ways to do things, and I kind of just threw them all together. But when I go to use them in scenes and stuff, you know, I can usually find 3 or 4 good sides on them, and there may be one bad side that I can put on the bottom or a back side that won't be visible. So you know, they'll give me the desired effects that I want to. You could take more time and build better looking crates than this. Like I said, I just kind of threw this all together. But you know, as far as scratch building, when it comes down to using the weathered plywood that had, you know, paneling that had came apart and sheets, you have to use really sharp knives with it. The wood gets really dried out and brittle after you bring it in. It's not the easiest thing to work with. It's definitely not as easy to cut and work with as balsa wood. It goes way beyond basswood in the brittle department. But it gives a real nice desired effect, and I like the looks of these crates. I think they'll look great in the scenery around the railroad. So anyway, thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me. I do appreciate it. Like and share my videos. Hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon, and you'll be notified when all this odd stuff comes out, as well as my regular structure builds. And you know, we've got a lot of buildings still left to build for this layout. Hopefully by the time I get done building some of these, we'll be able to move on to other things like installing them on a layout, I hope. Hopefully in the next year or so, maybe I can get to a permanent home again and be able to get a building to put my trains in. In any case, you know, I hope you're dragging your trains out and playing with them. I hope you're getting some scratch build materials and scratch building some type of a structure or something for your model railroad. It's very enjoyable. It's you know, it's a good way to hone your craft, even from building kits and that type of thing, and finding ways to add detail and stuff to your kits that make them more lifelike. So just, you know, enjoy the hobby. Happy model railroading.